Welcome to this course on persuasion. My name is Alex Kinedinik and I'll be your instructor. In this video, I'll tell you what to expect from the course, a little bit about my background, and we'll start right away. Well, this course is intended to be taken in under 1 day, in an hour or two, and for you to immediately begin applying these concepts in your professional work or personal life. And what we're going to discuss is the role of emotions in persuasion, because most people think, well, they make decisions logically. But what research shows, and the research I'm going to show you in the course, is that most decisions are incredibly emotional, deeply emotional. And what we have to do is just tap into the right emotions: excitement, fear, and similar emotions. And we're going to do that by understanding how to use imagery in our communication, understand how to use case study and write correct examples. And perhaps most important for persuasion is you'll learn to tap into people's existing value systems in which they're already so emotionally invested in. And when you do all these things, you'll start to inspire people more, get people to agree with you more, to see and understand your vision, and have many outcomes in negotiations or regular conversations go your way. So that's the course. A little bit about my background. Well, I've been an entrepreneur for the last 20 years, and I've had to lead teams, inspire employees, not just to work because I'm paying them, but to actually want to do better work. And especially if I need something, like there's a deadline, or if there's something coming up that's extra important for me, and I know that I need to have this employee really press the gas and give me a little bit more, I use these techniques to emotionally appeal to them so that they understand the importance of their work and what happens if we don't succeed as a company, and what happens if we do succeed, and just get people to be more motivated. I also use these tactics for persuasion in negotiation and in many additional scenarios. So I know that they work, and I know that they work especially since earlier on in my career, just because of my own personal nature. I'm a little bit more logical, and so I used to persuade people with logic, and that used to fall so flat. Like, people just didn't get persuaded. And I was thinking to myself, well, how can that be? I told them all the facts, everything is there, and they just went, meh. That's because we have to tap into emotions when persuading, and that's exactly what I'm going to share with you in this course, is all the things I've learned to manage people, to do sales, and in many, many, many other scenarios. So welcome, let's begin. As we start this course, I want to give you a very common scenario that we've all been in when it comes to persuading somebody. And that is, let's say you explain something really well. According to you, you think you explained it really well, and the person just doesn't get it. And it doesn't matter how many facts you present, or how well you present it, or maybe you thought you'd appeal to their emotional side, but it's just not resonating. And you're thinking, well, what's wrong with that person? Why aren't they getting it? Whenever we want to blame externally, the first thing to do is to pause that and look internally. And the internal work is, perhaps I can explain it better. Because the assumption of, I explained it really well, is just your assumption. Obviously, it's not working really well. And this is where the first thing to do is, can you simplify what you're explaining and rephrase what you're explaining? Maybe use a different example. Maybe tap into people's value systems, which is something we're going to talk about in this course. But do something different in your explanation, because people learn differently. People sometimes hear things in different ways. Like, you tell them one thing, but they really don't take away everything 100% as you told them, right? You think they take away exactly 100% as you tell them, but no, people have different memories, and people remember things more or less. So people don't actually take 100% of the things you give them, even though you think you do. So before you jump to conclusions, oh, like something's wrong with the other person, take one or two more tries to explain it better. Look inside yourself first. That's always the first go-to. Whenever you want to blame externally, look internally. So that will actually solve a lot of your persuasion problems and help you be more persuasive immediately without any additional skills. Just that mindset of openness to, hey, maybe it's me, because that's the easiest thing to change. You cannot change other people, but internally, if you can be a little flexible and adjust, that will go actually a really long way and solve a lot of your negotiation bottlenecks, miscommunications, etc. I want to show you a groundbreaking case in neuroscience that showed how much we use emotions to make decisions. We think that we're mostly logical and a little bit emotional, but what science ended up showing was that our decisions are tremendously emotional. And this is a real case from neuroscience. I'll show you the details in a second, but look at the title: How Only Being Able to Use Logic to Make Decisions Destroyed a Man's Life. And I'll have the link to this article in the resources of this video so you can read this on your own. It's fascinating. And in this video, I'll give you the highlights so that the video doesn't get too long. But the article starts out by highlighting how many of the major philosophers valued logic and highlighted how much we should be logical when making decisions. And sure, logic definitely has a place in our decision making. But how do we know what we deem as good, desirable, what we want in our life? These are things that are dictated by emotion. Emotion gives us clues about what's good, what's not good, what's preferable, and then we make logical decisions on how to get there. But our emotional feelings about all these things essentially create the entire foundation of the choices in our life. So this was the case. That patient's name was kept private. He's just known as Elliot. This was a successful person, high IQ individual, successful in career. You see, it says here he had a brain tumor, and the brain tumor wounded the frontal lobe tissue of his brain. And before that, he had a good job at a business firm, a role model for his colleagues, a good husband. So he had a full life, essentially. And he started getting headaches and eventually had to get the tumor removed. And the neuroscientist who worked with him was Anthony Damasio, who is a legend in neuroscience, one of the most reputable researchers in it. He did work a few decades ago, but his work was foundational. So when Elliot came to him as a patient after all the problems started happening, Elliot, it says here, was still pleasant, charming, and well aware of the day's news and what area of business he worked in. He had a good memory, but at the same time, his life had fallen apart. Any projects he did on the job were either left incomplete or had to be corrected, eventually leading to his loss of job. He got involved in like a money-making scheme with some shady characters. It ended up getting him to bankruptcy. He got divorced, married again to somebody that his family didn't approve, divorced again. Basically, his life fell apart. So he was still logical, but his life was falling apart. And doctors thought, well, he should be able to work. He seemed normal. And you see, many of his mental facilities were intact. So this was a conundrum, like, why can't he resume his life? His brain was working just fine, it seemed. And then the researcher, Anthony Damasio, he learned that Elliot, when he was at work, he might spend like an entire afternoon trying to figure out how to categorize his documents. Should it be organized by date or by case he's working on or by the size of the document? His cognitive facilities were still good. He tested well in IQ tests. Long-term memory was good, short-term memory was good, language skills were good, but he just couldn't live a normal life. It says here, like, he couldn't make plans for a few hours in advance. And then the realization here that this researcher had, Damasio, he realized that it wasn't an issue of intelligence, it was an issue of a disconnect with emotions. When Elliot took a test with lots of emotionally charged images, like burning buildings, gruesome accidents, what this researcher found was that this patient's emotions were always neutral. So his emotional compass could no longer tell him what's good, what's bad. He couldn't rely on emotions anymore to determine that. So everything felt equal. And so he wasn't able to determine what's good, what's bad, how he should live his life, what decisions to make, because he could no longer tell which option was good or bad because those were emotionally determined. And this is what people for thousands of years didn't realize. People always thought, oh, it's logic. But how we see good or bad in just about anything, from major things to minor things in life, that's emotionally driven. And it says here, he was able to come up with many options. Like if he had a challenge, he could come up with many solutions, but he could just not decide which is better. So without emotions, he just couldn't value or evaluate anything. So one of the conclusions here is that when emotion is impaired, so is decision making. So that's this case in neuroscience, which shows the tremendous extent to which our decisions are very strongly emotionally driven. If you want to persuade anyone or have any situation go your way, or you just know that you're going to face a situation where there's going to be a challenge and maybe there's going to be some emotional appeal, some logical appeal, timing of when you have that interaction is incredibly underrated. And to highlight that, I want to introduce you to some research. There is a certain type of study that's been replicated in many scenarios, so it's credible, where they look at judges in law presiding over different cases, and they look at how those judges come up with judgments. And if you ask the judges, what made you make a certain judgment? They will probably cite some laws, previous case history, all the professional things they should cite. But what these studies actually showed is that correlation to how long it has been since the judge has eaten mattered a lot in terms of the judge giving out lenient or harsh judgments. And the further you go from the judge having eaten, that's what these studies found. If the judge is groggy or tired or just wants to finish their day or any kind of situation like that, the judgments will be harsher because they look at statistics of the timing of the judgments. And it turned out that after the judge has eaten or they're feeling good and energetic, the judgments are nicer. Again, it's multiple studies, they've been replicated. But I first learned about this from the great Dr. Robert Sapolsky, who has been, I think, for a few decades, a researcher at Stanford University, one of the top neuroscientists in the world. And now he's, I think, retired in the last few years, and he's written a book that actually highlights this. So it's credible information, and the takeaway for us is, oh, okay, timing. We have to make sure that the people we're talking to are satiated, they're feeling good physically, they're comfortable. All of those things matter a lot. So, for example, you might have a meeting with somebody over food because they're going to be feeling good while they're eating. Now, there's a little tricky part here because if you talk about a lot of things and go on tangents, you'll finish the food, and after the food, people get a little tired and sleepy. So you want to get them when they're still alert. But those kinds of settings would have better outcomes for you, just regardless of the facts. So either with food or after eating, and if they're not too sleepy or gone to a food coma, that kind of thing, right? Then if they're satiated, if they're feeling good, so you might schedule meetings early in the day when people are still feeling good, but just not like, let's say, at the end of the day, like 5 p.m., they want to go home, they just want to get things over with, they haven't eaten for a while maybe. Those kinds of things really matter, and make sure that the person you're talking to is in a good mood at that moment. If no, you might actually want to say, hey, if you see that like they're not in a good mood at that time or they're having some discomfort, you would be proactively, you could say, hey, I see that everything's all right. You can ask, is everything all right? I see you're a little uncomfortable, you're a little fidgety, or whatever the situation might be. Would you like to reschedule? I totally understand. that might be a way to get yourself out of a bad situation that you know you might not have great outcomes in. So timing is really, really important, and it's very underrated. Almost no one talks about it. In this video, I want to start our conversation about decision making by looking at how long it takes a decision and all the ramifications that go along with it. Now, you have in under half a second, in under 1 second, what's called your gut reaction. Let's do an experiment. I have a chocolate and a green apple. If you love chocolate and sweets, you probably would immediately, without thinking, go for the chocolate. Why? Because in under 1 second, in under half a second, only some parts of your brain get activated. You might know the amygdala, that's part of your animal brain. It's responsible for many things like fear, fight or flight. It's also responsible for things that might hurt you or things you don't like. So aversion to things right away. Because things that you don't like, the things that can be bad for you, you have to make a really quick decision. Now, about 1 or 2 seconds later, your prefrontal cortex, the logic and reasoning part of your brain kicks in and tells you, hey, even though there was probably more sugar in the chocolate and you want the chocolate and you don't like the sour taste of the apple, guess what? The apple is better for you and you want long-term health and you went to the doctor and blah, 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 blah. It starts reasoning. That's your prefrontal cortex. It takes the brain longer for that part of the brain to take over and engage. So the first thing you have to understand is there's a lot of validity in your gut immediate reaction. A lot. Trust it to a large degree, but not entirely. Question it with your next 1 or 2 seconds. What happens then? The reasonable you starts to reason and you start adding layers to your initial potential decision, like the logic. So sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's confusing, because sometimes you aren't quite able to put words on why you made a certain choice with your gut reaction. Your gut reaction may be right, you may just not be able to logically explain it to yourself, you might not sense everything. So you may confuse your initial gut reaction. There's a lot of validity in that gut reaction, but of course we know that the longer you think about a problem, the more likely you will come up with the right outcome. Think of a chess player. There's an impulse to move right away, because when you move right away, when you make an action right away, there is hope with it. And when there is hope with it, there's a little bit of a dopamine release. It feels good. And it feels also good to get that little reward, like, oh, I'm going to make a quick decision, get a quick reward. Dopamine releases during the anticipation and a little bit during the actual getting of the reward. So that's the kid who's playing chess very fast and doesn't want to move, or people who play speed chess, they just want immediate gratification. That's fine sometimes, but the longer in chess and in life, the longer you think about a problem, you increase your chances of getting that decision right. Now, in life and in chess actually, if you think too long, that just becomes indecision. You run out of time in chess and in life. Indecision is a decision. It's a bad decision. It's a decision not to make a decision. So at some point you have to be decisive. It's an art form. When is the right time to strike? Of course, in life you have many other dimensions. You can get help, which is advised. There's wisdom in getting help, in coaching, and etc. To have a team. And of course, you want to rely on your own experience. The first time you make this decision or any other decision, you're going to make a poorer decision likely than the 20th time or the 100th time you make a similar decision. Hopefully, we have to learn. And that's the timeline of how long you should allocate, the accuracy increasing with the time you spend to make a decision, just about any decision. Some decisions you have to make quickly, some decisions you can wait. So knowing if you have a particular decision that's looming, you have to think about how long do you have to make the decision, give yourself the right amount of time, then give yourself within that time the right amount of resources, and then eventually pick a moment, pick a deadline to decide. That process will increase the chances that you will make the right decision no matter what the situation is. We already know that we have to evoke emotion to persuade people. But how do we evoke emotion? You can't just tell people, hey, get emotional right now. Okay, you're not emotional? Okay, what about now? You can't do it with logic so much, right? You can't just say, be emotional. What you have to do is use imagery. Not like pictures, here's a picture, but imagery with your words. For example, take the phrase, I see the light at the end of the tunnel. That's a picture. You can picture a tunnel with a light at the end of the tunnel. You can also say something like that. We're going to establish a beachhead in this market, and we're going to grow from there. Okay, beachhead. You can sort of understand what that is, right? A little spot on the beach. You start there, and you go from there, expand. These are images. And there are many metaphors and common sayings you can use, or you can make them up on the spot, depending on what your situation requires. But there are many image-rich things you can say and present. Why is that important? Because when somebody can picture an image, that's very connected to emotional centers. Different images trigger emotions in very different ways. They trigger fear, they trigger happiness, they trigger past memories and past experiences. And what happened? Oh, when the last time I saw the light at the end of the tunnel, that was great, right? And then I'm like, oh, okay, well, then maybe this time it will be also great. But what's happening here really is you're tapping into the part of the brain that can, the imagery is connected to people's emotions. And there's a lot of imagery that's universal, because maybe light at the end of the tunnel is used, let's say, in the United States, but maybe it's not really a thing that's used in Asian cultures. But nature-rich images are universal because they're so ingrained in us. Like, for example, we're going to climb to the top of the mountain, to the top of the hill. We're going to cross the sea, we're going to cross the ocean or something. Images like that are just so deeply ingrained in us that they're universal across cultures, and anyone can relate. So even if you're dealing with cross-cultural scenarios, you can still use imagery like that. But the right images, when you paint that picture, and when the people you're talking to really start to not consciously necessarily picture things like, oh, I'm picturing a mountain, I'm picturing a tunnel, not like that, but it just happens. Then they start to see your point. Literally, see your point. Not logically understand your point. Step one, step two. Logic is important, but that creation of images is so much stronger. That's why we use metaphors. Metaphors like light at the end of the tunnel, or dozens and dozens and dozens of others, really help you paint a picture that persuades people without necessarily using logic. In a previous video, we covered the power of imagery and metaphors to create an emotional connection that persuades. And there's one certain type of an image that is incredibly powerful, and that is a case study. An example, a story of a certain company or individual who faced some challenges, overcame those challenges, and succeeded, or did something else that's desirable. So a little segue into statistics versus case studies. Statistics are more accurate. They're logical. If you have 1,000 or let's say million cases of something, there can be any kinds of case studies in them. There could be a crazy person with just one example case study, totally not representative of reality, but they're a case study. Like, for example, even in the entrepreneurship world, there's a really common case study that's cited. People say, well, if Mark Zuckerberg can start Facebook, then I can start my own social media company. I've heard this dozens of times. And similar, you see, you have a great example, one person who succeeds enormously, way outside the bell curve. Most likely this won't happen to most people just because of statistics. Usually most people fall into where most people fall in, somewhere in the middle. Don't totally fail, don't totally succeed, somewhere in the middle. But the case study is wildly inspiring if you see, oh, this successful entrepreneur or this successful person, they did this. This works in every field. You know, the 4-minute mile in running. At first, it was a great barrier. Nobody could do it. And then one person did it. And then other people said, oh, it's possible. Like that case study was possible. And then people tried and a few succeeded. It's like that across different fields. So this case study of a successful person who accomplishes what you want to accomplish and has all the success and has all the glorified images associated with it, that's the image that you want to lead with. Oh, so-and-so did this and it created these results. This is also social proof. You see this in marketing all the time. People want social proof. People don't want to do what hasn't been done before and which hasn't been successful. But when somebody's doing something before and it's successful, people jump on board. This is like that in many startups. Like, hey, make money in this way. Nobody tries it until, hey, this person is succeeding making money in this way. And then everybody jumps on it. Think of, Bitcoin. How many people jumped on it just because everybody else jumped on it, but they had no idea what Bitcoin was all about and all that. And it's like that across industry. So this is what you want to create as your image. Just find an existing case study. If there isn't one yet, you can create or come up with an example of what could happen. Paint the picture of a potential case study and lead with that example so that your listener or the person you're debating with or arguing with or talking to can really visualize what could happen and sprinkle in, well, what if we don't do this? What if we don't do enough to become that case study? Oh, we're going to lose our leadership in the market, or we're going to have to, we're going to have decrease in revenue. We may have to have layoffs or something. You want to be very tasteful and careful about how you sprinkle in negative things, but you also want to motivate with a hinge, a little bit, a touch of fear so that people don't forget, oh yeah, there's the good outcome, but we also really want to avoid that bad outcome. So let's do that case study, which seemed to have worked. So that's the power of case study. And it's a lot more powerful than statistics, even though statistics tend to be more accurate. Like if you take 1 million cases and 80% of the time something happened, it's very likely that is going to happen to you. But in that million, you can pick any outliers. There's outliers in every direction, successful, failures, and you can create a case study, but the case study is vivid. But if you really want to understand what the truth is, you look at data and statistics. But to persuade, you do case studies. In this video, I want to introduce you to the concept of fear and how it can persuade people in an incredibly strong way. Now, in the field of motivation, it's very well understood that there are two kinds of motivators, positive and negatives. For example, if I tell you, eat vegetables because you're going to be healthy, or do your homework so you're going to get a good grade. And these are kind of motivating statements, but they don't really work that well because everybody knows they should eat vegetables. And how many people really eat vegetables? They want to, of course they want to, but they don't do it. So you can think of these kinds of positive statements. Do something difficult, you'll get a good outcome. Let's say they have like a 50% or a 40% success rate or motivation strength. But on the other hand, compare that to if I gave you the same scenarios and I said, if you don't eat vegetables, you're going to get disease and gain weight and you're going to have health problems and you're going to die sooner. This is fear-based. Other scenario, the homework scenario. Imagine if you don't do this homework, you're going to fail the class and be held back a whole year and your classmates are going to make fun of you. Nobody wants to fail. Failing a class is the biggest motivator for studying. Same with the job. You can do a good job and get a promotion maybe, but actually if you don't do a good job, you're going to get fired. People will do a lot to not get fired. So these negative ideas are incredibly motivating. It's unpleasant to think about it. We don't want to think like that. Like, who wants to think about experiencing fear? It's totally unpleasant, I understand. I didn't make the human brain, so this is not an issue that I can help with. We're just dealing with what is known. And so, in addition to understanding that fear is an incredible motivator, fear is also incredibly irrational, because we've all been in this fear spiral. For example, you take a possibly negative outcome, like, what if I don't go to the gym? I'm gonna maybe gain a quarter of a pound this week or something, right? Very little negative outcome. But that has the potential to spiral out of control in our minds. Like, for example, well, what happens if I don't go this week? Oh, I'm going to start to get a bad habit of not going to the gym more. Then I'm going to gain a pound, 2 pounds, 5 pounds. And then, wow, I'm going to be worse at sports, and I'm going to be moving slowly. And then I'm going to exercise even less. And then I'm going to gain more weight. And then I'm going to have health problems. And then I'm going to start getting sick. And then I'm going to be in a hospital. And I'm going to fail my business because I won't be able to work anymore, because I'll have to spend most of my time dealing with my health issues. And my life will fall apart, everything will be bad, my family will leave me, I'm going to die. Okay, so this is irrational. But we've all been in that situation where we've done not such a severe irrational pattern in our minds, but we've all done that downward negative spiral of fear. You might think, oh, well, if I don't do well at this project at work, my boss is not going to think good about my work, and maybe I'm going to get fired. If I get fired, I'm going to lose my apartment. My family is going to be embarrassed of me. I'm going to be homeless. The level of steps that you go through your mind creating such a fear is way more, and it's irrational to the reality, because there are many spots in that train of thought where you can correct things in real life. So knowing that we have these two things, fear is very motivating, but fear can also have this kind of negative downward spiral in our minds. We can use that to persuade. Here's how that would work. So you don't say, eat your vegetables or do some good outcome. You start telling people, whether you're selling to them or you're trying to get a manager to do something, imagine the bad case. Don't talk to them about the good case. I mean, you start with that, of course, because it's a little bit too downer to just talk about bad situations, but you want to weave in somewhere in the middle of that conversation where it's not certain how things would go, your way or not your way. You will tell whoever you're talking to, well, think about what if we don't do this? We're going to lose this opportunity. This might happen. That might happen. All these bad things might happen. Imagine how we would move forward. Now, the very strong word, imagine. So they might imagine. And there you're inducing that fear spiral, and people will not want to have that negative outcome. And very often people go to incredibly great lengths to avoid that negative outcome. And this is how you persuade using fear, ethically, please. Not too much, don't abuse this, but you can still persuade using fear in that way when logic and facts matter a lot less. So we've covered the importance of imagery for persuasion. We've also covered the importance of case studies to create that vivid example in people's minds. But what should our case study be? What should our imagery be? This is what we're going to talk about now. And this is having to do with understanding your audience's emotional needs, their fears, their desires, their value system, their motivation, what's important for them. You can't be random. If you are random, your chances of persuading is very little. So first, you have to understand the people you're talking to. You can be very intimate with the person. You can know them very well for years, which you would know what their value systems are and you would know what motivates them. Or it can be somebody you're meeting for the first or second time, you have no idea. If you're meeting somebody for the first or second or third time, you don't know what their value systems are or what their needs are, you ask. This is really it. You have to ask them about their situation. You don't ask, what is your value system? Tell me all about it. is a weird question, right? But you ask a few questions. Hey, what are you trying to accomplish now? What is your solution now? It really depends on the scenario, but these are just some examples. You ask, have you tried this and that to solve your problem? Or what about this approach? Have you researched that? Which kind of outcome would be ideal for you? With my coaching clients, I always ask, which outcome would be ideal for you by the end of our coaching together? And they tell me exactly, and I know exactly what to do. This is how you get to know your audience, so you don't guess or assume, because guessing or assuming is incredibly error prone. You really don't want to do that. So that's how you get to tell a stranger. You don't know them very well, but you know them a little after those questions. So listen very attentively, they will tell you. Now, if some people you know really well, your spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, friends, family, you know their value systems, you know what really appeals to them. Let's say you want to persuade somebody to get married and have a family, just for example, and you know that they really care about what their family thinks, like their parents, their mother, father, right? So you might say something like, that would make your mother and father so happy and fulfilled. They would be the happiest possible if such and such thing happened, if you got married or whatever. This is in personal life. At work, let's say somebody really cares about being eco-friendly and sustainability and recycling and all of this, right? Then you might say, well, okay, I really need to use imagery related to that. And so you might talk about the plastic in the ocean that's floating around, and you might talk about how that's increasing, or you might add a study of how that floating plastic in the ocean is expanding, or how a certain kind of a fish is dying, right? That's a case study, like, oh, this kind of a fish is dying. That's an example of all the things that's happening bad. Or you can talk about the microplastics that are getting into our environment and maybe like affecting our water and all of us essentially, which is actually kind of true. And so you might direct the conversation in that direction if you know that the person you're talking to cares about sustainability and environment. They'll be like, yes, it's so bad. Definitely, let's do whatever we can. Let's stop using the plastics and let's do this initiative to create a more eco-friendly, sustainable office. Even if it costs some money, it's really important, right? So it's not just about dollars and cents, it's values, right? This is where we're going. You see, we're talking about people's values, where in business, you like money is more important, right? Like you have to make money and be profitable. But there are some things that are more important than money. These are the things that tap into people's value systems. People's values are usually more important for them than money. Like not a lot of money, there's like gray areas. It's more important than $1, not more important than $1 million. Kind of. But generally, people will pay more, will go the extra mile, will agree to more things if you tap into their value systems or for something that's already important to them. Then the imagery related to it, then the metaphors and the case studies will be that much stronger and resonate that much more. So you always curate your pitch, your persuasion, your points to match the person you're talking to, their value system. This is where it will be the strongest. As we've been discussing, emotions are a very big part of persuasion. And in that whole emotional formula, one thing that's really important is how the other person feels about you personally. Do they see you as trustworthy? Do they like you more or less? If it's in a professional setting, there's still levels of affinity. You may have built rapport with someone, or you may have no rapport, or you may have no chemistry with someone. Same with in your personal situation, and it's similar in your professional work. And of course, in your professional work, you kind of have to comply and work with people, but you still have people you like a little more, a little less. It's just natural. We can't lose that. So what you want to do is build a little rapport. A great way of doing that is by asking people about themselves, giving various compliments, matching their energy level. So if a person is a little bit quieter, you're a little quieter. You might have heard of this technique. It's called mirroring. Salespeople do this all the time. They talk a little bit like their potential buyers talk. If their potential buyers talk a little slow, the salesperson slows down. You don't have to do this to that degree. You want to be genuine, but genuinely, you take a real interest in the other person. Try to like them first and foremost, because when you do that genuinely, everything becomes easy. You don't have to fake building rapport. You'll like them. You'll want to know about them, right? Imagine if you're talking to someone and you just don't want to be there and you don't really care about what they have to say. Then you're kind of fidgety and you're kind of watching your clock, your watch. Well, I'm losing time. I could have been doing anything else that's better. You're just not going to build a rapport. But if you come with your mindset into the situation of, I like this person, I want what's best for them, how can we build rapport really well? If you're selling to them or if you're motivating with them, it's the same mindset. You're thinking, how can we move forward together best? How can I do everything great for them? Then you'll naturally want to, and of course, naturally, that will get them to like you a little more. Now, of course, there's no such person that's liked by everyone. Some people will like you, some people won't like you. It's part of life. Even though I want everybody to like me, and I'm sure you do too. Not everybody loves me. It's okay. At the end of the day, it's okay. But you're just working to increase your chances of that, because before you persuade, a necessary step is rapport. Not because it's cool, but because the more a person likes you, the facts may be the same. You may be saying A, B, C, D, but if they like you, they'll listen a little bit more. They'll put a little more trust in what you're saying. And whatever you're doing and telling them is going to resonate more. It's funny. It feels like it shouldn't be that way, right? Because facts don't matter, it seems like. And yes, facts are only a part of the picture. You want to get people to be receptive to what you're telling them, and you have to lay out the groundwork for that before you try to persuade. Because if you try to persuade someone who doesn't trust you, that's so hard. Or somebody who's skeptical, that's so hard. Why not work to first make your life easier, get into a good place, find a place of agreement, something you and the other party, something you want to build towards. That framework, that foundation will get the other person's ear and heart to open up. And that's the necessary step before persuading.